Now, this is a paradoxical statement, and I'm about to present it to you right now about INFJs. NI is absolutely indispensable to INFJ enlightenment, or in the language of my recent book, INFJ spiritualization, highest stage of INFJ life in my scheme. But NI is also the main obstacle to enlightenment. So how do we unpack this, all right, to make it at least face value a little bit credible? So I think that the fact that NI is actually necessary to enlightenment, spiritualization, something that I've been talking about in videos, lately, more and more, and certainly this topic will come back this as a leitmotif, The idea being more or less that unlike INFJs, for example, who are able to be in the world and lead in the world and thrive in the world, mainly through the channel of FE, they have this kind of almost supernatural ability to just connect and understand how things work and feel comfortable driving. INFJs require in the first place individuation, and individuation for an INFJ requires the possession, articulation, and projection of their NI worldview. Of course, individuation for an ENFJ happens as well, but it doesn't happen primarily through the prism of NI. It happens primarily through the prism of FE. Comes with its challenges too, of course, but we're not going to discuss them in detail here. So for an INFJ to sort of resolve the tension between belonging to their subjectivity, which is already an NI subjectivity, and external reality, they need to find a way to connect the two, but connecting the two is going to obviously, without exception, mean how to translate the insights of NI, the mechanisms of NI, which are peculiar to each person, although there are structural similarities between all the NI dominants, and the particular life world that they happen to be engaged in. And by life world, I mean the world that they inhabit, particular time and place with certain kinds of people, certain kinds of job institutions, and so forth, right? Slight distinction between the world in an abstract sense and the particular person's life world. I didn't come up with the term life world. This is a term from phenomenology, which is very, very useful. So connecting your inner world to your life world. NI has to be translated because your inner world is an NI world predominantly, when we've discussed this before. So NI absolutely necessary to spiritualization. NI is an enemy for two reasons, or at least in two contexts. If you're an adaptive submissive INFJ, right, you're going to see NI as an enemy because you're going to think that indiscriminate assertion of your subjectivity is a terrifying notion, and it will threaten your possible identification with a group that you want to be a part of. You want to be identifying with this group, you want to be a part of a group. This is in the nature also of FE belonging, and introjective FE. And you're going to see the too much sort of projection of your subjectivity as a problem. You're going to be repressing it. You're going to be repressing your NI. As a result of repressing your NI, you're not going to be allowing it to flourish. So of course, NI is not objectively an enemy. This is the catch here. NI is subjectively perceived by the adaptive submissive INFJ as an enemy. In order to progress further, they have to start learning to trust NI more. In some sense, you could say they have to learn to trust themselves more. There is very likely a strong correlation between the kind of childhood you had and the different stages you went through, and the kind of mode of existence you end up embracing as an INFJ later on, whether it's adaptive submissive or solipsistic or spiritualized. But it's rare that someone is spiritualized straight away, because spiritualized INFJs, spiritualization in general, individuation in the Jungian terminology is a journey. Depends on maturing as an adult. Now, in the case of the solipsistic INFJ, NI is an enemy in a different sense. It's the fact that, unlike the adaptive INFJ, the solipsistic INFJ is really, really attached to their NI. And they're so attached to their NI that they have both an NI worldview and a certain mental representation of what NI is for them, right? They're not afraid of having that representation, but in fact, they're almost like too attached to that internal representation, to the detriment of the valuing of what's outside. And as a result of that, they don't know. In this case, you might almost say that NI is more objectively an enemy, but it's not really the case. It's still a subjective experience. What the enemy here is the level of attachments that they have to NI, their NI, which unbeknownst to them ends up being a kind of smothering of the full potential of NI, because the full potential of NI is something that you really, really should always keep in mind. The full potential of NI, full consolidation plus expansion. Consolidation, you can do that solipsistically. Expansion, you can. So the full expression and the full potential of NI is always manifested from your inner NI world onto external reality. So the full potential of NI is always realized in the external world. The solipsistic INFJ is so attached to their subjectivity that they tend to think that by projecting NI outwards, they're going to put themselves at risk because they identify with their representation of what NI is for them very, very closely, indeed a little too strongly. Their level of attachment to that NI set of representations prevents them from even thinking of how to develop a particular kind of life project inside the perimeter of their life world that would characterize the translation of their NI worldview into the language of external reality, that is, thoughts, actions, motives, organization, engaging other people. Often, in addition to that, there's another layer, which is that this whole domain of external reality and its various activities is a little bit denigrated. In some sense, the DNA of this is in Christianity and Platonism. You know, the idea that whatever happens in external reality is a pale copy of what happens at the abstract level, and the mind gives you direct access to the abstract realm of the forms, of the Platonic ideas. Whatever happens in external reality is in the realm of corruption. It's corruptible. It doesn't live forever. Things like that. So strong Christian resonance here. But you can sense in the way in which, in a sense, like the solipsistic INFJ is confusing without quite realizing it, the very slow evolution of NI with the timelessness and immortality of NI. They want to remain immortal, and that process, through that kind of distorted lens, they refrain from engaging external reality and to allow themselves to, in fact, translate the world into a project that would allow them to flourish even further and reach spiritualization. So in the case of the solipsistic INFJ, it's different from the adaptive INFJ. The adaptive INFJ does not trust their NI and represses it. The solipsistic INFJ is so attached to the representation of what NI is for them that they smother NI by not allowing it to be projected outside. So in both cases, there is a problematic relationship with the function. You could argue that the relationship is problematic with not just NI, but all other functions. And you start saying, well, the solipsistic INFJ has a problematic relationship with FE and everything. Yes, but all these are downstream from the initial problem, which is the problematic relationship with NI. So INFJs also have to contend with NI means existentially. You should never forget that. It's never to be taken for granted. And to know more about these topics, to get more in detail on how INFJs interact with external reality, find value, purpose, and a rich life in a world often perceived as hostile to INFJs, particularly in our modern, contemporary, and scary world, The Infinite Soul is the book to go on INFJ life in the modern world. If you have loved the book but not dropped a review, please consider dropping a review. It helps with the referencing massively. Thank you for that. And of course, its prequel, The Ecstatic Soul, a new look at the INFJ personality, which is the most in-depth study of the INFJ mind you'll find. So get those books at the links below if you haven't yet. And don't forget, the lifeblood of my channel is my Patreon page. There's a link to Patreon. If you'd like to support me every month from $3.50 a month or more, it helps you massively, keeps the channel going, and you get access to bonus content, including some in-depth study of some topics from my books. Okay, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.